So thank you very much for coming today. It's very nice to see all of you. So this week's topic is impermanence and death. Well, a very, very important topic. One topic that is very close to my heart. Probably the most important topic in anyone's life. So today's topic specifically is when death comes. And so probably some of you have experienced already a loved one passing away. Maybe you have directly seen it, directly attended to the bedside of someone passing, doing the last few breaths. And you can see how people change when they're on their deathbed, how their faces change. The vitality leaves the body gradually, slowly. They become meek and thin, weak. They can't move properly anymore. Everything slows down. And for many of us, this process, this gradual process, might come in that gradual form. For many of us, it might come pretty sudden, that we can't tell. We don't know when our life ends, and we don't know how it will end. And that creates what? Fear, doesn't it? So thinking about death, thinking about our passing on, usually is something that we shun. It's a topic that we don't really like to discuss. It brings up all kinds of negative emotions for most people. Depression, sadness, anxiety, fear, worry, to name a few. And so we then tend to avoid this topic. We kind of push it aside. But something inside of ourselves still knows that it's there. It still knows that we're heading there. That all of us are going there. Something inside of ourselves knows that everything you're building will collapse. Everything you construct and everything you depend on will become independable. That we can't really rely on things anymore, on people. When we die very alone. And that is nothing pleasant to think about for most people. Yeah. Particularly if we are very, very attached to certain circumstances that are currently in our life. In such classes, we always have people that are a bit more on the depressive side. They kind of often say, I'm okay with dying. And then you have people who are celebrating life. When they hear about death, they don't really like it. Because we're not really celebrating life. We're just simply really, in a noisy way, avoiding death, which is inseparable from life. You can't separate them. Separating or making death and life appear as if they were two things that have nothing to do with one another, that are even considered very often as opposites, is totally absurd. Yet we do that. We would celebrate birthdays every year, even look forward to them. But death we do not celebrate the same way. There's no balloons. Yes, when someone dies, you don't bring balloons into their room and sing happy songs. We don't do stuff like that. When someone dies, then when people come into their room, they might bring some flowers, and their faces are really depressed and really sad. But we've been celebrating death every year also. While celebrating birth, you also celebrate death. How can you separate them? It's like, again, the example that I always give is poisoned food. We celebrate the poisoned food and we despise the food poisoning, well knowing that it's poisoned food. Right? But sure, you can be fooled by the good smell and the good looks of the food, and you can feel like, okay, that looks great. And you somehow can completely forget about the fact that this will lead to food poisoning. And we're quite good at that. At even sometimes intentionally avoiding these topics. But as I said, some of the most important reflections is the reflection on death. There's several benefits to it. One little benefit would be that it immediately puts things into perspective. Like if you argue with your partner, for example. You have this argument about whatever, what people argue about. And all of a sudden, you remember that this might be the last thing that you do, actually. And it really hits you. Let's say you have some heart pain, some pain in your chest all of a sudden. Your left arm turns numb. The fighting is immediately becoming unimportant, inessential. It's not vital. We don't have to fight to live. We don't have to feel bad and angry to achieve enjoyable things. Like, for example, somebody paying attention to you. Some people fight because it's very often it's about attention, right? It's about your other half trying to get your attention somehow. And then we fight and we scream, "Listen to me. Don't you hear what I'm saying? I've been saying this 20 times already." It's a desperate attempt to get somebody to pay attention to you. Because attention is something that heals. It solves problems. Listening. And so if we feel unheard, we feel ignored, it hurts. And death can immediately make you listen. It kind of wakes people up. It's urgent. And it makes us listen to that single thing that is most valuable and important to us, which is life. Because we tend to forget that we are alive. The mind, at least, it tends to forget that it's alive. And we sacrifice this thing that's most precious for us for the sake of getting somewhere else. Trying to get somewhere. Rushing. Everything needs to get faster and faster and more. It's never enough. And so, if you look at your mind, honestly, you will find that it's mostly in a rushed state, trying to get somewhere. You're trying to figure out life somehow by thinking it through. And whatever is thought is mostly about the future or the past. You can't think much about the present moment. You're just in a room. There's nothing much to think about. But you can think up problems, tons of them, that don't exist, that either have already passed on, or that are just pure fiction, fantasy about how the future might turn out. And so most of us spend our entire lifetime, completely enslaved to fiction in our heads. That fiction is all about a me trying to live, trying to get somewhere so it can live. I need to get something, I need to become someone so that I can live, that I can enjoy myself. And it's so paradoxical because it's that very thing. We try to be happy. It's the pursuit of happiness that keeps us from happiness. Obviously. As long as you're pursuing something, it shows you don't have it. Otherwise, why pursue it if you have it? So the pursuit of happiness, you can use another word for it. You can simply say unfulfillment. Being unfulfilled. It sounds great. It's a great selling point. The pursuit of happiness. Let's all go after it. The thing is, if you go after happiness now, you will go after happiness in 10 years. And then you will still pursue happiness even in 20 years. And most people still pursue happiness during their last breath. For them, then it's about heaven and hell and afterlife, and they're worried about what might happen, because when you die, then it's kind of revealed you don't really know what's going on. And now you have to go into the unknown alone. And nobody is going to hold your hand. And we're totally thrown back onto ourselves. That single thing that most people never look at in their entire lifetime. We don't really look at ourselves. But I don't have to prove this to you. You can look at the way your mind works. What did you think about today? From the morning on until class. What did your mind think about the whole day long? Do you still remember all thoughts? Lots and lots of thoughts. Lots of stories and scenarios. All based on an unhappy me trying to somehow get happy. And all that thinking, does it really help you to be happy? Did it already get you there? Because this is the pursuit of happiness. Thinking is the pursuit of happiness. In order to actually get happy, you have to let go of the pursuit. Kind of discover that happiness is what you most naturally are. If you take out all the clouds, all the ideas that we have of ourselves and others, then happiness is left. You can find it in the most simple state, just being quiet on the inside. But there it is. It slowly comes out at first. If you can stay without thought, just a little while, long enough so that it can have an impact. And you start to feel alive more and more. The longer you stay in that state, the more you feel vitalized, charged, literally on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally. The mind becomes sharp, the senses become sharp. All we have to do is just stay in that state. And for a beginner, kind of looks like that state comes for a second, and then there is again 4 hours of thinking. And then again a second of, wow, I'm here. And then you want to extend the second into 4 hours, and the 4 hours into a second. So that thinking isn't what's important anymore in life. But life is what's important. In that moment when you prioritize life, connecting with life, over prioritizing thought about life, about me, you prioritize you, yourself, me. Instead of thinking about yourself, enter yourself. Instead of thinking about life, enter life. And we can only do that if the story of life stops. Then suddenly there it is. And the more you stay in that state, the more the fear of death drops away. And in a very real way, it falls away. And as soon as you start thinking again, ooh, there it is again. Oh, but I might die. It might not work out. And immediately you realize, there is the story again. And you drop it. You let it dissolve naturally. You just see what it is, just a thought. And it goes. And so we prioritize silence over noise. We prioritize ourselves over trying to make others so that they make us happy. We make ourselves happy. We prioritize life, actual life, real life, here and now, over trying to live. Being life over doing it. Trying to do life somehow. Which is a funny thing, isn't it? Is life something that you kind of can do like a machine? Like some sort of bicycle that you need to get somewhere, and hopefully you do it successfully, because otherwise there will be a big man in the sky punishing you if you don't do it well. So your job is to run this bicycle the right way, and don't you dare to mess up, because everyone else, not only the big bearded man in the sky is watching you, but everybody else also watches you, and they all think only about you all day long. And whether you're messing up or not, that's on other people's minds constantly. You. And whether you're making it or not. So it's really important whether you make it or not. But see, that's illusionary. There's no substance to it. It's funny, actually. But our mind thinks that way. What are others thinking about me? But it's totally irrelevant. And the great news is that death shows that very, very clearly, that it's totally irrelevant. So instead, if that was your last day today, let's dare to go there. If this is your last day today, what would be important? What would you like to share with this group? What would you like to share with your loved ones? And you see, things become important that are usually in the background a little bit, like kindness, for example, gratitude. The things that I wanted to express when my mom died was just thankfulness. Just to say thank you for all she did. But during my lifetime, I never really had the guts to do it. I never really actually thought about it. But there she was, passing away. So what is relevant then? Thank you. No? And I love you, we say these things. And suddenly we become incredibly tender and warm and kind and loving and caring and radiant. Suddenly, also, death does that wonderful thing and humbles us. Big time sometimes. When you see someone die or when you are threatened by that, immediately all these fancy ideas that we have of ourselves, they are just popped like a bubble. Because that's what they are. Just bubbles. Unimportant stuff. How am I perceived by others? It doesn't matter. If I'm going to die in 10 minutes, it doesn't matter how you guys think about me. Really not. Not at all. And if I know that all of us will die, then I can relate to you from an equal perspective. Not as whatever idea I might have of myself and whatever idea I might have of you, but equal. We all die, and we all want to be happy. We all want to be seen and loved and heard and appreciated. And death shows that so clearly. So I consider death a friend. a very good friend. And some good friends, sometimes they say painful things, but they speak the truth because they want to help you. So they hold you back from certain things, or they criticize you, and they mean well. Death has the same kind of impact. It's not pleasant, but why is it that it's not pleasant when we think of death? Because it reminds us that we're not living. That's why it's not pleasant, isn't it? If you think of death and there is not a trace of unpleasantness, and if you feel into death and you're confronted with death and there is not the slightest trace of unpleasantness, but you're totally at peace with it, that is a possibility. Now, when somebody dies that's close to you, and that's kind of like the core topic of today, when you have to take care of somebody that is about to die. My teacher told me, if you ever lose somebody that you love, look very, very well, he told me. Look very, very well. I didn't really understand what he meant at that time. I was just like 19 or something. So for me that was rather abstract. But then my grandfather passed, then my grandmother passed. I was raised by both of them, so very close figures in my life. Then my mother died, and I learned to look. Not so much at the person dying, but at my mind. What happens there when someone dies? There's a feeling of loss, right? You lose somebody. It's almost like, now I'm alone. Particularly when the parents died, it's quite tough because suddenly you feel like very alone. Even I'm an adult already, and I apparently am in charge of my life. Which is quite a funny idea, but anyhow, let's just say it like that. I'm an adult that's in charge of my life. Still, mommy dies, very scared. I'm alone. I don't know what to do. Suddenly, like a very big support system is just gone. So it is very, very serious. Look at yourself very well. What is it that you fear to lose? It must be the idea that you own someone, do you? Do you own someone? Because if you don't, you can't lose them either. If there is no owner, how can there be a loser? But if you are at peace with yourself, truly, if you rest in your silence deeply, you're never losing anything, ever. And the more you stay in that silence, the more you see it, you learn it, you feel it. Wow, I'm neither losing nor am I gaining anything. I'm just here. And things come and go, but that's kind of irrelevant. It's not that important anymore. Things always come and go. But since you found yourself in that silence, you don't come and go with things anymore. And that is what gives you a true refuge in the face of death. And the other person that dies, if you are with somebody that dies, what this person desperately needs is your being. And most family members, they rush around and they try to, let's get an ambulance, let's do this, let's do that. It's understandable. We operate from fear. But that's the last thing the dying person needs. People freaking out around them. I remember my mom, when she was in her dying process, many people came to visit her. And she knew a lot of healers and spiritual people. And they all came with all their tips. There's this green smoothie recipe. You need to eat these kale smoothies. It's really good against cancer. She had cancer. And then there's this Indian medicine. You try this traditional Chinese medicine. You try acupuncture. Do this healing, hands-on healing. All these kind of suggestions came to her. You smell on these divine oils. It will help you with the grace of God. And So many people came with advice. And eventually she just kicked everybody out. She just like, leave me alone. She kicked people out. People very close to her, actually. But she couldn't stand that they were trying to fix her. You see the point? It's people coming in that want to fix her. As if she was a broken thing. As if death means that you are broken, but it's not. And my mom knew that. She had a very deep spiritual life. She knew it doesn't mean that you're broken because you die, that something is wrong with you. No. Death is okay. But the people brought all this fear in. They couldn't handle it, that she was passing on. So they were confronting her with this fear. They were basically not being present with her. They were being lost in their own fears. They were not being with her. You see what I mean? And I was one of them. Even after all my years of meditation experience, what did I do? I put my hands on her cancer, sending healing light, trying to somehow fix her with mind power and all that kind of stuff. And she would be quite closed as long as I did that. She didn't really talk with me much. Until the point when I let her be. And I stopped trying to change her because I was uncomfortable. Instead, I dropped my own discomfort. And that was the seeing part. And that's what she needed. She needed a person that was not uncomfortable around her. Does that make sense? And that's what dying people need. People who die, they want people around them who are just there. Who are not lost in their discomfort. Now that is a tall order, because if somebody that's close to you dies, you will be uncomfortable. There is no way around that. But you can learn to be okay with your discomfort, and that helps already heaps. If you try to be comfortable, that doesn't work. But if you accept yourself fully in your sadness, your grief, your discomfort, the dying person can feel that you're actually there as presence, not as a complicated entity trying to fix things that are falling apart. So there is moments in life when we have to learn to let go deeply and completely. Death is the king of these moments. It's the ultimate time when we have to let go of who we think we are, who we think we need to be, how others should be, how they should not be. And if you have learned to live during your lifetime, if you, in other words, have actually accessed life in silence, with joy, with happiness, just being with yourself, being able to embrace what is, just as it is, then your death will be very inspiring, peaceful to other people. Because you're not really leaving or coming from somewhere or something. That's all thought. And the more you live, the more joyful you will be. The more at ease you are, peaceful with yourself. You can sleep at night. You can be with other people. And you can be in silence with yourself. So that challenges me, at least, to make really clear in my mind, what am I doing here right now? Why? What's my purpose? Why am I alive? And for me personally, it's a devotion to truth. I want to be with what is real, not what is thought, but with life. And it automatically makes very clear what priorities are today. You have 24 more hours. What are you going to do with them? Or you have 1 more hour now. How are you going to spend it? If it was your last. And the skill level increases, the sadness goes away. And you can be filled by life and operate from intuition and kindness, compassion and joy. That's what we all want anyways. To be whole. Okay. So that's all that comes to mind for this topic today. It's a broad topic and a very important one. Are there any questions?